Hey guys, Dr. Sean here. We're sitting on the dock today, dead battery. So I thought, you know what, while I'm out here, I'll just kind of share some stuff with you. I got asked a question on Facebook the other day, Doc, what do you think about cholesterol? Now I've gone over this before in the past, but this might be good for you guys. Cholesterol is such an interesting thing. You know, the way things move medically through our country is that it tends to start the new breakthroughs on one coast, and they'll slowly trickle into the middle of the country. It may take a decade before our science actually catches up and changes things. So we look at cholesterol. We hear it all the time. Oh my gosh, high cholesterol, you're all gonna die. It's gonna lead to your death, you're doomed. Is that really the case? And so I started wondering one day, you know, years ago in practice, I'm looking at this saying, all right, you know, it doesn't make any sense to me because we've been treating high cholesterol medically now for 30 years or more. You know, the statin drugs came out about 20, 25 years ago. They had a whole market of drugs prior to that. We've been doing this for a long, long time. And common sense kicked in, and I started thinking to myself, well, if we're treating all the high-risk people, all the people who are susceptible to stroke or heart attack or something of that nature, if you're treating them with this wonderful drug, then in theory, wouldn't the number of strokes and heart attacks start coming down? But they haven't. They haven't changed at all. If you look at the percentage for the population that we have today, it's unchanged in 30 years. And I'm thinking, all right, we're medicating roughly 50 million people against high cholesterol. And yet we see no change in stroke or heart disease. None. And so it's got to get you thinking a little bit. You got to get the wheels spinning and start thinking, well, it doesn't make any sense. If I gave you something for your home and I said, hey, look, if you apply this to your walls, your house won't catch on fire, wouldn't they have proof? If you had more and more fires after you apply the flame retardant, you know, it doesn't work. But for some reason, when it comes to cholesterol, we ignore this fact. And then your physicians, unfortunately, are bombarded with, you know, article after article and all these things saying that, gosh, you know, you got to keep pushing this. You got to keep pushing the agenda. Originally, cholesterol was 300. That was normal. Then, well, we got to lower it. It's not low enough. Why? Because heart disease isn't coming down. We must not be doing enough. So they lowered it. 250. Not enough. 200. Not enough. If we lower it anymore, oh, wait a minute. People are pushing back now. We can't lower it below 200. Well, why don't we change the makeup? Lower the numbers that make up the 200. That way, we're technically lowering the 200, but we're not telling anybody. Shh. We're going to lower the LDL. Drop it all the way down to 70. Lower that sucker into the toilet. Get the triglycerides all the way in the ground. And technically, that would lower it below 200, but we won't tell anybody. And guess what happened to heart disease and stroke? Nothing. Not a thing. So what does that tell you then? Is cholesterol really the problem? And that brings us to another point that got me interested years ago. I thought, you know, when they draw your blood, what do they draw it out of? They don't poke an artery. You'd be all over the place, making a mess. They draw it out of your veins. And I started thinking, a vein. Now, from what I was taught in anatomy and physiology when I went through school, they teach you that a vein is so slow in the current that's flowing through it that it has little locks and levees that drop. Pushes the blood, drops the door. Pushes the blood, drops the door. So it doesn't flow backwards. It's so poor at pushing blood through the plumbing that it's got little levers to stop it from going the wrong direction. Now, let's go back to the thing I like to call common sense. Thomas Paine would have been my best friend. So we got common sense. And we're thinking to ourselves, okay, if I look at nature, where do you get the moss, the lily pads, all the green sludge and the algae? Does it form on the fast-moving river like an artery? Or does it form on the pond that's stagnant and sitting there like a vein? Forms on the pond. So when you draw that blood out of a vein, which is like a pond, why isn't it all plaqued up and gummed up? And so a gentleman asked this question. He was up for a Nobel Prize for medicine for asking the question, why don't veins plaque? Why don't they fill up? They're the most common sense thing that would, but they don't. Food for thought, something to think about. Here's your answer. Arteries are surrounded by muscle, lots of it. Veins are not. And what we've learned is that when muscle, skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, when that muscle becomes brittle, it tends to tear. And when that muscle tears, all of a sudden now we get problems. The body likes to use cholesterol like drywall paste. And it says, uh-oh, I got a crack. Fill the crack. The problem is you're filling the crack in a straw. As you start filling the crack, it starts to fill the straw. What cracks? Muscle that becomes brittle. Veins don't have all that muscle. Therefore, they don't get the cracks. And they don't get the need for the repair. So if you're brittle in your arteries and you're brittle in that muscle, guess what? We've learned. You're brittle in all your muscle. Skeletal muscle, hamstrings, quads, low back, neck muscles, calf muscles. They're all tight. Now in a second study that came out, totally separate from this, they compared athletes, runners, people who do marathons and their longevity versus people who are flexible. Guess what they found? The people who are flexible, on average, have 7 times less likelihood for developing a stroke or a heart attack than someone who's a runner and athletic but lacks flexibility. You see it all the time in pro athletes, guys. They're running down a basketball court up and down, and boom, they drop over a heart attack. Or a pro football player during summer training camp. Happens all the time. You don't see it with yoga instructors. You don't see it a whole lot with Pilates instructors. People who are flexible, limber. If they're limber in the big muscles, they're limber in the little. So when it comes to cholesterol, maybe we're kind of chicken little and the sky is falling, oh my God. It's so unimportant in your diet that they took it off food labels this year. It's no longer on there because the FDA decided, look, there's nothing you can do in your diet that's going to raise your cholesterol that much to be harmful. Food for thought, Dr. Sean.